In 1988, lawyers bearing the Supreme Court order turned up at the gates of Parliament. But the gatesmen had already been tipped off. They were told to shut the door against the lawyers. Why did it happen? To understand this story, it's necessary to study some history. Now, UMNO had always been the leader of the then governing coalition, Barisan Nasional. 3 years after Tun Salleh became the Lord President, there was a leadership tussle in UMNO. Tengku Razaleigh Hamzah stood on the one side. On the other stood the incumbent President and Prime Minister, Dr. Tun bin Mohamad. Tengku Razaleigh was widely expected to win. The elections were carried out. Out of the 1,479 voters, Mahathir had polled 769 votes. Tengku Razaleigh had obtained, it was said, 718 votes. Tengku Razaleigh lost by 43 votes. Razaleigh's supporters argued that the election had been rigged. 12 of them filed a suit at the High Court and they asked for a new election. They alleged and showed proof that 78 of the 1,479 delegates were illegal delegates. They were from unregistered branches. The plaintiffs also claimed the election papers had been tampered with. Justice Harun agreed with them. He ruled that several UMNO delegates had indeed come from unregistered branches. That, of course, logically meant that the UMNO leadership and its contests had to be reenacted. The judge then did something wholly inexplicable. He ruled that the entire UMNO had become an illegal party. That killed the case filed by the Tengku Razaleigh camp. Mahathir then formed a new party. He called it UMNO Baru or New UMNO. Senior members tried to convince the party faithful that the party was still the same and intact. They used a brilliant tactic. On a billboard emblazoned with the name UMNO Baru, party hacks would paint out the word Baru or New, leaving the word UMNO. The opposition party PAS called the new UMNO UMNO Chat or painted UMNO. Now, under the principle of the rule of law, the judiciary must remain separate, independent, and inviolate by either Parliament or the executive. In a number of cases involving UMNO or related persons, the judiciary had not supported UMNO or the government. The courts, as usual, applied the law according to the evidence. That didn't please Mahathir. He took, it was said, umbrage. Shortly after the UMNO elections, the word umbrage would take on a new significance. Mahathir himself thought that the judiciary was far too independent. He set about to rectify the situation. He famously said, "The judiciary says, although you passed a law with a certain thing in mind, we think your mind is wrong. We want to give our own interpretation to it. If we disagree, the courts will say, we will interpret your disagreement." Now we know exactly what we want to do, said Mahathir, but once we do it, it is interpreted in a different way by the courts. Mahathir then went on to accuse the judges of being black sheep, whom he said wished to be fiercely independent and play to public opinion. In 1988, Mahathir amended Articles 121 and 145 of the Constitution. These amendments removed from the judiciary its judicial power. Under these amendments, only Parliament could grant the judiciary any judicial power it deemed fit. And guess what? Mahathir controlled a majority of the MPs in Parliament. Shockingly, the Attorney General was given the power to choose in which courts he would file his cases. Imagine that. This completely breached the doctrine of the separation of powers. These amendments are and remain unconstitutional. In a rare break with judicial tradition, Tun Salleh, as the head of the judiciary, was forced to speak publicly of the need to defend the independence and autonomy of the judiciary. But he didn't go any further. His fellow judges thought that was not enough. They all gathered and addressed a confidential letter to the king and to the other Malay rulers. Mahathir summoned the head of the judiciary. Usually, the head of the executive must go and see the head of the judiciary, but this was the other way around. At the meeting, Tun Salleh Abas recalls that Mahathir had accused him of bias in handling the UMNO cases. Mahathir demanded that he resign. Salleh was immediately suspended. Salleh initially agreed to resign and did so. To his shock, he discovered that craftily his suspension had been backdated so as to nullify some of his earlier decisions in pending UMNO cases. He promptly withdrew his resignation. The government began impeachment proceedings against Tun Salleh. Tun Salleh demanded to be tried publicly by peers of equal standing, retired Lord Presidents, for example. Salleh's counsel, Anthony Lester QC from England, objected to the tribunal's composition. Lester QC argued that Abdul Hamid, a Supreme Court judge who had been a member, had by that time been appointed as acting Lord President. If Salleh's impeachment succeeded, Lester argued, Hamid would take over as Lord President. So Hamid was in a position of conflict. Again, two of the tribunal's members were relatively junior judges, High Court judges. Two foreign judges were from countries not noted for judicial independence. Guess who they were? The tribunal, however, rejected these arguments. Salleh consequently withdrew from the proceedings, saying that he will get no justice there. He applied to the Supreme Court to stay the proceedings. The Supreme Court, in an emergency sitting, ordered the impeachment proceedings to be stayed. The order was delivered to the gates of Parliament. But as I said, Parliament's guardsmen were asked to close the gates. One of the judges, Datuk Sri George Shah, called the person or persons in charge and threatened them with contempt of court. Eventually, the gates swung open. However, on Mahathir's advice, the king suspended the 5 Supreme Court judges who had issued the stay order. The government appointed new judges to fill the void left in the Supreme Court. These judges refused to hear any further motions filed by Tun Salleh Abas. Eventually, Tun Salleh Abas was found guilty and relieved of his post. On the other hand, the 5 judges who had stood by the rule of law and who had supported his application were tribunalized. They lost everything. Now there is a twist to this story. Some years later, Mahathir claimed that there was another person, vastly more powerful than him, who had ordered Mahathir to sack Tun Salleh Abas. That is another story for another day. Salleh Abas was always known as an honest man. In all his rulings, he ruled in accordance with secular law. He was also a devout Muslim. Recalling the fateful meeting with Mahathir when he had demanded that Tun Salleh Abas resign, and it was a Friday, Tun Salleh Abas said, "I leave my fate to the judgment of Allah, and as it's a Friday, I wish to quote the Holy Quran, which says, 'No misfortune will fall upon us except what has been decreed by Allah. He is our protector, and in whom the believers should place their trust.'" His high ideals and his simple way of living and his ultimate sacrifice makes him a legal colossus, a giant worth cherishing. Our gratitude and our prayers are with the late Tun Salleh Abas, the Lord President of the Supreme Court. At this time, our thoughts and prayers are with his family and his friends. It is very late, almost 2 in the morning. I'm standing here with my suit. This is my last respects to a man I've grown to admire greatly. Good night, or rather, good morning.